For over 10,000 years, the galaxy had known peace through something called the Combat League. It was a special system where different alien species solved their problems through organized fights instead of real wars. Every species that joined had to follow very strict rules about how to fight. Captain Veltar was one of the leaders of this system. He belonged to a species called the Zephyrians. They looked like tall, living crystals that made beautiful sounds when they talked to each other. Veltar had seen thousands of battles over his long life, and every single one followed the same basic pattern. When two species had a disagreement, they would bring their warriors to a special fighting area. Both sides would use only certain types of weapons that the League allowed. The battles were more like dances than real fights. Warriors would challenge each other one by one, bow respectfully, and then fight with honor. If someone got hurt badly, the fight would stop so they could get medical help. If someone died, there would be a ceremony to honor them. The Thoraxian species was famous for their smart battle plans. They had many minds connected together like a giant brain, so they could think of very complex strategies. The Luminals were beings made of pure energy who provided technology for the battles. The Keth-Morans were warrior poets who would speak beautiful words about courage and honor before each fight. Every species brought their own traditions to the Combat League. Some liked to use swords and shields. Others preferred energy weapons that could stun enemies instead of killing them. Some species would sing war songs during battle. Others would paint special symbols on their bodies for good luck. But they all agreed on one thing: fighting should be civilized and respectful. Veltar remembered his first battle as a young Zephyrian warrior. He had been so nervous that his crystal body had made squeaky sounds instead of the proper harmonic tones. His opponent, a gentle giant from the Roku species, had actually stopped the fight to help him calm down and find his proper voice. They had become friends after the battle ended. That was how things worked in the Combat League. Enemies could become friends. Warriors respected each other. Death was rare, and when it happened, it was usually by accident. The galaxy had not seen a real war in thousands of years. On this particular day, Veltar was in his command center reviewing reports from recent battles. Everything seemed normal. The Aquatic Federation had defeated the Stone Builders in a dispute over water rights on a desert planet. The battle had lasted exactly 7 days as tradition required. Both sides had used approved weapons only. The Stone Builders had surrendered with honor when they lost half their warriors, and the Aquatic Federation had provided medical care for all the wounded. Suddenly, his communication officer made an excited chirping sound. "Captain Veltar, we are receiving some very strange signals from Sector 7834. Veltar moved over to the communication station. His crystal feet made soft ringing sounds on the metal floor. "What kind of signals?" "They appear to be primitive electromagnetic transmissions, sir. Very basic technology. But the content is unusual." Veltar listened to the translated signals. The creatures sending them called themselves humans, and they lived on a small blue and green planet they called Earth. The signals talked about their wars and conflicts, but something seemed wrong about them. "These humans," Veltar said slowly, "they speak of something called total war and unconditional surrender. What do these terms mean?" The communication officer's crystal body flickered with confusion. "I am not certain, sir. They seem to describe conflicts where the goal is to completely destroy the enemy rather than achieve honor through combat." Veltar felt a strange vibration in his crystal structure. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, something between curiosity and worry. "Continue monitoring their signals. I want to learn more about these humans." Over the next few days, more reports came in about the human signals. They talked about weapons that could destroy entire cities. They described battles where millions of soldiers died. They had concepts like scorched earth tactics and fight to the last man that made no sense to any species in the Combat League. The other Zephyrian officers were fascinated but not concerned. "Clearly these humans are still in a primitive stage of development," said Commander Ristal. "Once they discover faster-than-light travel and join the galactic community, they will learn proper civilized combat like everyone else." Veltar was not so sure. Something about these human transmissions bothered him. They spoke of war not as an art or a ceremony, but as a problem to be solved by any means necessary. They seemed to have no concept of fighting with honor or following rules. But the decision was not his to make alone. When the Galactic Council met to discuss the humans, every representative agreed that they should be invited to join the Combat League once they achieved space travel. After all, every species eventually learned to fight properly. The humans would be no different. As Veltar left the council chamber that day, he made a note in his personal files. Monitor human development carefully. Something about their approach to conflict seems different. He had no idea just how different it would turn out to be. 3 years later, everything changed. The humans had finally built their first faster-than-light spaceship and sent it beyond their solar system. When the small probe entered Zephyrian space, it triggered automatic detection systems that had been waiting patiently for this moment. Captain Veltar received the alert while reviewing battle reports from the Crab Nebula sector. His crystal body hummed with excitement as he read the message. The humans had finally achieved space travel. It was time for first contact. The Galactic Council moved quickly to organize a diplomatic mission. Ambassador Veltar was chosen to lead the team because he had been studying human transmissions for years. He selected a crew of the galaxy's best diplomats and translators. They loaded their ship with gifts and prepared for what they expected to be a routine first contact mission. The journey to Earth took 2 weeks. During the trip, Veltar reviewed everything they knew about humans. The signals showed they were a young species, probably only a few thousand years old. They had recently unified their planet under something called the United Nations. They seemed eager to explore space and meet other intelligent life. When the Zephyrian ship entered Earth's solar system, human space stations immediately detected them. Radio transmissions filled the airwaves as humans frantically tried to understand what was happening. Veltar was impressed by how quickly they organized a response. Within hours, human leaders had agreed to meet with the aliens. The meeting took place on a space station orbiting Earth. Ambassador Veltar and his team materialized in the station's main conference room using their teleportation technology. The humans waiting for them looked exactly like their transmissions had suggested. Small, soft-skinned bipeds with varying colors of skin and hair. The lead human stepped forward and spoke in their primitive but understandable language. "Welcome to Earth. I am Kim Dae-ho, Secretary General of the United Nations. This is Colonel Park Min-soo, our military advisor." Veltar was pleased by their polite greeting. His crystal body rang with harmonious tones as he responded. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective. We come to welcome you into the galactic community." The humans listened carefully as Veltar explained about the Combat League. He described how hundreds of species had joined together to solve conflicts through organized, honorable combat. He talked about the rules and traditions that kept the galaxy peaceful. He showed them videos of elegant battles where warriors fought with respect and dignity. Kim Dae-ho asked many questions about the League's structure and government. He seemed particularly interested in how disputes were resolved and how new members were integrated. Veltar was impressed by the humans' intelligence and curiosity. But when Colonel Park Min-soo started asking about military matters, the conversation became strange. The human military officer wanted to know about weapon restrictions, casualty, limits, and rules of engagement. When Veltar explained that battles were meant to be honorable contests with minimal death, Colonel Park's face showed confusion. "I do not understand," Colonel Park said slowly. "If the goal is to win the dispute, why would you limit your weapons or tactics? Why not use whatever means necessary to achieve victory?" Veltar's crystal body flickered with surprise. "Because victory without honor is meaningless. Combat is an art form, a way to demonstrate courage and skill. The goal is not simply to defeat the enemy, but to do so with dignity and respect." Colonel Park exchanged a look with Kim Dae-ho that Veltar could not interpret. The human military officer asked more questions about specific battle rules. Could warriors use deception? Were surprise attacks allowed? What about targeting supply lines or command centers? Each question made Veltar more uncomfortable. These humans seemed to Think about combat in completely different terms. They talked about strategic objectives and acceptable losses in ways that suggested they viewed battle as simply a tool to achieve goals, not as an honorable tradition. When Colonel Park began describing human military history, Veltar felt vibrations of unease through his crystal structure. The human spoke of something called World War II, where over 50 million beings had died. He mentioned nuclear weapons that could destroy entire cities. He described tactics like total war, where civilian populations became targets. But surely these are historical artifacts, Veltar said hopefully. Your species has evolved beyond such primitive brutality. Colonel Park was quiet for a long moment. We have not had a global war in decades, he said carefully, but our military doctrine still emphasizes winning at all costs when the survival of our people is at stake. Kim Dae-ho quickly changed the subject back to diplomacy and trade agreements. He was clearly trying to present his species in the best possible light. Veltar appreciated the effort, but he could not forget Colonel Park's words. The meeting ended with humanity formally accepting an invitation to join the Combat League. They would be given 6 months to prepare their first warriors and learn the basic rules of civilized combat. Advanced technology and galactic citizenship would follow once they proved they could fight with honor. As the Zephyrian ship departed Earth, Veltar sat in his quarters reviewing the meeting recordings. Something about the humans worried him, but he could not identify exactly what it was. Every species went through an adjustment period when joining the League. The humans would learn proper combat techniques just like everyone else. At least that was what he hoped. 6 months later, humanity received its first official combat assignment. The dispute was simple and routine. A disagreement between humans and the Kethmoran warrior poets over mining rights in the Vega system. Both species wanted to extract rare crystals from the same asteroid belt, and neither would back down. The Galactic Council assigned the conflict to Combat Zone 7, a large asteroid that had been specially prepared for battle. According to League protocols, each side would send exactly 1,000 warriors. They could use only approved weapons from the standard list: energy rifles, plasma swords, and personal shields. The battle would last for 1 full week, giving both sides time to demonstrate their courage and skill. The Kethmorans were excited about facing the new species. They were known throughout the galaxy for their beautiful fighting style. Their warriors moved like dancers, reciting poetry while they fought. They believed that combat was the highest form of art, where physical skill combined with intellectual expression to create something beautiful. Colonel Lee Jae-min commanded the human force. He was a veteran of several Earth conflicts and had spent months studying League combat rules. He did not like the restrictions, but he understood that following them was necessary for humanity to gain acceptance in the galactic community. The human warriors arrived at the asteroid in standard transport ships. The Kethmorans watched from their own vessels as the humans unloaded their equipment. Everything appeared normal. The humans carried approved energy rifles and wore standard combat armor. Their weapons and gear had all passed League inspections. But something was different about how the humans moved. Instead of preparing individual challenges and honor duels like other species, they immediately began working together as organized groups. They set up defensive positions and established communication networks. They scouted the terrain and marked strategic locations. When the battle officially began, the Kethmorans expected the humans to announce themselves with formal challenges. In traditional League combat, warriors would step forward, declare their names and achievements, and invite opponents to single combat. The battle would begin with poetry and ceremony. Instead, the humans did something no one had ever seen before. They divided into small groups and spread across the asteroid. They used their energy rifles not for individual duels, but to provide covering fire for their teammates. When Kethmoran warriors advanced to offer challenges, they found themselves facing coordinated crossfire from multiple positions. The Kethmorans were completely unprepared for this type of fighting. Their beautiful combat techniques were designed for one-on-one battles, not for facing organized groups working together. When they tried to recite their traditional war poetry, human snipers would target them from hidden positions. When they Attempted graceful sword attacks, human soldiers would suppress them with rifle fire while their comrades flanked from the sides. Colonel Lee had studied every League battle for the past decade. He noticed that all species fought as individuals, even when they were part of larger forces. No one had ever developed tactics for coordinated group combat because it was considered dishonorable to gang up on a single opponent. The humans had no such restrictions in their thinking. They treated the battle like a military operation with clear objectives. Their goal was to control the asteroid and force the Kethmorans to surrender. Individual honor was less important than achieving the mission. Within the first few hours, the human forces had established secure positions at all the asteroid's landing sites. They set up overlapping fields of fire that made it dangerous for Kethmoran warriors to move in the open. They used their communication systems to coordinate attacks and share intelligence about enemy movements. The Kethmorans kept trying to fight according to League traditions. Small groups of warriors would advance toward human positions, calling out challenges and offering to engage in honorable single combat. The humans would respond with suppressing fire that forced the aliens to take cover. When the Kethmorans tried to retreat, human squads would pursue them and attack from multiple directions. By the end of the first day, the Kethmorans had lost over 100 warriors. The humans had lost only 3 soldiers, and those deaths had been from accidents rather than combat. The alien warriors began to realize that they were facing something completely outside their experience. The Kethmoran commander, a poet warrior named Velthara, tried to adapt his tactics. He organized larger groups of warriors and attempted coordinated attacks. But his forces had trained for individual combat their entire lives. They did not know how to work together as military units. Meanwhile, the humans continued to improve their positions. They built defensive walls using asteroid rock and set up automated weapon systems. They established supply lines and medical stations. They turned the battle into a siege, forcing the Kethmorans to attack prepared positions. On the 4th day, Velthara requested a meeting with Colonel Lee under a flag of truce. The 2 commanders met in a neutral area between their forces. The Kethmoran poet warrior looked tired and confused. "Your people fight strangely," Velthara said. "Where is the honor in your tactics? Where is the beauty in your combat?" Colonel Lee considered his words carefully. "We fight to win. Honor and beauty are luxuries we cannot afford when our people's lives are at stake." The meeting lasted only a few minutes. Velthara returned to his forces and, after consulting with his officers, sent a formal surrender message. The battle had lasted 4 days instead of the traditional week. The humans had achieved complete victory with minimal casualties. Across the galaxy, other species watched the battle recordings with growing unease. Everything about human combat was wrong, yet undeniably effective. News of humanity's strange victory spread quickly through the galaxy. In council chambers and military academies, alien leaders watched the battle recordings over and over, trying to understand what they had witnessed. The humans had won decisively, but they had broken every unwritten rule of civilized combat. The Thoraxian hive mind was particularly disturbed by the human tactics. The Thoraxians were considered the greatest strategic minds in the galaxy. Their species shared thoughts across millions of individuals, creating a collective intelligence that could calculate battle outcomes with mathematical precision. They had never lost a major engagement in over 3,000 years. Queen Nodzixara, the primary consciousness of the Thoraxian military branch, made a formal request to the Combat League. The hive mind wanted to face the humans directly. They were confident that their superior intellect could counter whatever crude tactics these primitive newcomers might use. The dispute was arranged around territorial rights to a small moon in the Centauri system. Both species claimed the moon contained resources they needed. The Combat League approved a standard engagement, 2,000 warriors per side, 1-week duration, approved weapons only. The Thoraxians spent months preparing for the battle. Their collective mind analyzed every second of the human victory over the Kethmorans. They identified patterns in human movement, calculated optimal responses to human tactics, and developed counter-strategies for every possible scenario. They were certain that their careful planning would overcome human unpredictability. Captain Yoon So-ra commanded the human expedition. She was younger than Colonel Lee but had earned her position through aggressive leadership in Earth's corporate wars. Unlike Lee, who had reluctantly followed League rules, Yoon actively looked for ways to exploit them. The human equipment appeared standard when it passed League inspection. Energy rifles, combat armor, communication devices, and personal shields. Everything matched the approved specifications exactly. But Yoon's engineers had modified every piece of gear to maximize performance within the technical limits. Their energy rifles fired faster and more accurately than standard models. Their armor was lighter and more flexible. Their communication systems could handle much more complex data sharing. Most importantly, they had brought military engineers and fabrication equipment disguised as standard maintenance gear. The battle took place on a barren moon with low gravity and thin atmosphere. Both sides established base camps at opposite ends of a large crater. The Thoraxians expected a week-long chess match where superior planning would gradually overcome human aggression. On the first day, the humans did exactly what the Thoraxians predicted. They established defensive positions, sent out scouting parties, and began probing attacks against Thoraxian lines. The hive mind responded with calculated countermoves, repositioning forces, and setting up ambushes. Everything proceeded according to their battle plan. But on the second day, something unexpected happened. The humans began building structures that were not in any of the battle recordings. They used local materials to construct fortifications that were far more sophisticated than simple defensive positions. They built workshops, communication towers, and even manufacturing facilities. The Thoraxian collective mind was confused. Building permanent structures during a week-long battle made no strategic sense. They recalculated their plans, but could not understand the human logic. By the third day, the human engineers had created an entire forward operating base. They were manufacturing additional equipment, improving their weapons, and even building vehicles from asteroid materials. The humans were not just fighting a battle. They were establishing a military colony. Queen Node Zixara realized that her careful calculations were useless. The Thoraxians had planned for a traditional engagement where both sides used fixed resources for 1 week. The humans were treating the battle like a long-term military campaign, where adaptation and innovation mattered more than initial planning. The hive mind tried to respond by accelerating their own timeline. They launched major attacks designed to overrun human positions before the humans could complete their preparations. But the human base was already too well defended. Automated weapon systems, carefully planned kill zones, and coordinated defensive fire devastated every Thoraxian assault. Worse, the humans began launching their own attacks. But these were not the simple raids the Thoraxians had prepared for. Human forces would strike at Thoraxian supply lines, disrupt communication networks, and attack from unexpected directions. They used their newly manufactured equipment to create weapons and vehicles that were not in any League database. On the fourth day, Captain Yoon made an offer that shocked everyone watching the battle. She contacted Queen Node Zixara directly and proposed an immediate surrender. Not a human surrender, a Thoraxian one. Your forces are trapped in defensive positions with limited supplies, Yoon explained calmly. We control the high ground, the supply routes, and the manufacturing capability. We can continue this battle for months if necessary, but you cannot. Surrender now and save your remaining warriors. The Thoraxian hive mind spent hours calculating possibilities. Every scenario led to the same conclusion. The humans had fundamentally changed the nature of the conflict. This was no longer a traditional League battle with predetermined parameters. It had become something else entirely. A real war. Queen Node Zixara made the most difficult decision in Thoraxian history. The hive mind formally surrendered, ending the battle 3 days early. They had lost over 800 warriors while the humans lost fewer than 50. But the real shock came during the post-battle analysis. The humans had not violated a single League rule. Everything they did was technically legal according to the combat regulations. They had simply interpreted those rules in ways that no one had ever considered. Across the galaxy, Military leaders watched the recordings with growing alarm. The humans were not just winning battles. They were changing the fundamental nature of warfare itself.